Hello and welcome again to this week's feedback videos. This week we're looking at week 8, the Jacksonian era. In this video, I'm going to give you your feedback on the chapter discussion questions. The first question was, how did the rise of Andrew Jackson reflect the democratization of American politics? Well, this was an era when the right to vote was spreading through the population. It was no longer that of a propertied elite. One by one, states removed property and or taxation requirements for the right to vote, so any white man could vote. And Jackson reflected this in a number of ways. He appealed to this newly enfranchised group of working men. We see the rise in participation, not just in numbers, but also in percentage in presidential elections in this period. Far more people and a far bigger proportion of those able to vote came out to vote. Jackson rejected the sort of elite politics, the so-called corrupt bargain that had given the presidency to John Quincy Adams, and appealed over the heads of those elites to the people. Jacksonian politics was about style as much as substance. He pioneered things like popular electioneering, going out there and getting the vote for him and for his party in elections. We see, for example, the mobbing of the White House when Jackson was inaugurated, which was seen by his opponents as a sign that the mob had taken over. This was symbolic of how popular Jackson was, how successful he'd been in mobilizing popular support for his program. Also, he presented himself as a popular hero. As a Westerner, he was an outsider from the traditional politics of the East Coast. And as a general, as kind of a man of action, a hero of wars against Spain, against the Indians, and against Britain, he also played on that popularity as a war hero. In some ways, a divide we often see in American politics between people casting themselves as popular leaders versus the quote-unquote elites or establishment. We see that established in Jackson's day, and we still see that in politics to this day. The second question was, why did Jackson support the removal of the Cherokee from Georgia? Well, as we've seen, Jackson's democracy was a white man's democracy. Jackson had been a, quote, Indian fighter, that is, a general had fought successfully in wars against Native Americans. He was personally not particularly sympathetic to the plight of the Cherokee. Economically, the discovery of gold meant there was an interest in the United States removing the Cherokee, and in Georgia removing the Cherokee in particular. And also Jackson was championing states' rights against the Native Americans, against the court which had sided with the Native Americans. Supposedly, although there's no proof he said this, Jackson said when Justice Marshall ruled in favor of the Cherokee, John Marshall can say that, but let him enforce it, meaning he can't if the president says otherwise. The last question was, what caused the emergence of the Whig Party? Well, a number of things did. There was an economic crisis. The bank crisis led to an economic collapse, the crash of 1837, which Jackson's successor Van Buren bore the brunt of. He was nicknamed Van Ruin by his opponents. There was a rejection of the style of Jackson, which was seen as slightly scandalous by traditional elites. They favored what the book calls a talented, virtuous elite running society rather than the people, as Jackson had championed. There was opposition to Jackson's Indian policy and to the implications of that for the role of the federal government, and a rejection in general of his strong executive that he had pioneered, his use of the veto to block legislation, for example. The Whigs saw themselves, and this is reflected in a name which harked back to politics before the revolution. They saw themselves as defending the Constitution against the overreach of populist leaders like Jackson.